Hi, Paul here. It's another piano to orchestra. So I'm going to show you my piano sketch and then I'm going to show you what I did and what patches I used, this time from SSO TUTTI. So this is using this very, very simple, easy to use orchestral ensembles library, perfectly arranged and blended by Andy Blaney and put into Blake's fantastic new SSO script. It's so easy to use and loads of fun. So before I go into the piano, I'm just going to play you the whole track through and then I'll start telling you about the piano, how I've developed it, all that kind of stuff. So let's have a listen first up. So what have we got going on here? Well, so if I open just the orchestra long patch, you can see that on most of these patches, I've got the same balance. It's close tree ambient. And that's kind of it. The tracks are really, really straightforward, very simple. Here's the legato, for example, the woodwinds and strings. Yeah, again, you can see it's just close tree ambient and I'm just playing and using a little bit of mod wheel, little bit of expression on most of these just to shape it a little bit, and that's it. It's just as simple as that. Load and play. What else have I got on the overall thing? Well, I've got a little bit of ozone just to kind of brighten it up a tiny bit and put a little bit of compression and stuff like that on. It's not doing masses, but it's just kind of sorting out my final balance just on the CD master, which is quite a gentle setting. That's quite a nice one. I quite like that. The only other thing I'm using is the Air Studios reverb, and I'm just putting a bit, it's just a kind of bit of extra reverb on stuff. Of course, SSO was recorded in Air, so I figured let's add a little bit more air to it. So I've just got, in terms of settings here, it's super basic. It's just the expansive strings. I haven't done anything to it. It's just got a nice spread in the hall, no direct signal, and a little bit of a smiley face EQ curve. We've got layer A, the canopy is high, Mellotech, and the damping is out, just to give me, because the whole point of this is to add a bit of extra reverb. So that's the thing. The only other things I'm using, I've got two little tiny channel EQs, but I'll come to those when I show you those tracks. And then finally, I've used this fabulous subgen just on the bass drum booms, just to add a little bit of rumble to them. That's it. So what about the actual piece? So this is just an example of where I start with a piano sound. In this case, I'm using my favorite sketching piano, which is the simple one here. And this is my Studio Yamaha C3, which I recorded for the Originals Media Toolkit. Check that out if you haven't seen it. It's a fantastic product. It raises 100% of the proceeds go to an amazing charity called Blueprint for All, which do incredible work here in London. So that's my piano. And basically, I am just using that to sketch with. So here's the piano sketch, and I'm going to put the music up on screen so you can follow along. This was basically kind of improvised in probably, I guess, maybe 3 or 4 blocks. I obviously hadn't done any of the tempo work. I kind of did that a first pass after I did the piano, and then the rest of it I kind of tweaked after I'd started putting the orchestra in. We'll talk about that in a minute. Here's the piano. What usually happens when I'm improvising like this is I will get a kind of idea. I'll start playing, chords will come to me, and then I'll get stuck. Something will block. I'll play something wrong that doesn't sound right. I'll fumble around trying to find the next chord, and then I'll start up again. That's a really great way of doing it, because I feel like you keep a through line as opposed to trying to get everything all at once in one go, which is kind of impossible. And what's going to happen is your music will become simpler because you're limited by the stuff that you can do on the keyboard, if the keyboard is your composing tool. Now, so this I then print out, and this is a key part of the thing. And if you don't read music, I would urge you to learn to read music. It's really, really simple. It's really simple. You'll pick it up in a couple of weeks easily. And the thing that it gives you is when you're doing stuff like this, it stops you having to try and keep everything in your head. And you can instead, for example, here, I print out my piano part. I look for shapes, I look for where the lines are going and what might be a really interesting line in a specific instrument or instrument group. And then I can play that in from the paper, from the notes. And it just makes everything so much quicker. So it's a definite idea to learn if you don't already do that. What I did next was I put out my template, which is just the patches from this lovely new TUTTI library. And then I work out, okay, how am I going to orchestrate? Now, the thing that I'm not having to worry about by using this ensemble library is I'm not having to worry about what do the violin ones play, what do the violin twos play, what do the flutes play, is there a piccolo here? And yes, of course, it's a compromise, but it's also a shortcut, an incredibly simple and fast way. And if you don't know that much about orchestration, this makes it super easy because Andy has done a lot of the hard work in working out where the instruments should kind of blend across, the ranges, the performance characteristics, like how much vibrato in different things, all that kind of stuff is all done for you. So you can concentrate on the sound. And I do have an old saying, which is, if it sounds good, it is good. So what do we have? So for example, here at the start, if I just solo this part. So it's an inner part. A really great way to start is to just try and figure out what's not a featured melody, what is going to help support the harmony. And this is something that you can kind of build up. So for example, I can see that I've got a low pattern at the very opening in my left hand. And that's just a performance of a line. So I'll tend to see, you can see that this is now a separate block of MIDI data. So I've played in a line, I'm happy with it, I stop, I move on to the next. I probably actually didn't move on to the next. I probably did most of this block at the front and then finally moved on to the next bit. But here is where I'm starting to take the material that I've got and I'm improvising new parts and sections into it. So this is the brass and strings, and this sounds like this. We've got stuff like this descending line here. We've got a line that comes in here, if I just solo this one. So I've made this part a little bit detached. It's just played with a normal longs patch. Filigree, that's the kind of, it's that decoration. It's those extra little bits where you just go, oh, something suggests itself from the notes that you've got, but also everything else that you're hearing. So if I just go back to the full thing, let's just listen to this first block again. So you can hear that everything kind of depends on everything else. And the way that I'm massaging things as I'm playing them in is I'm getting them to lock in together and getting them to kind of feel like I'm conducting an orchestra. And yes, there's duplication here. There's strings playing in different patches. There's brass and strings and woodwind and strings and high stuff and mid stuff and low stuff. But the overall effect I want to get is like this section where you get the kind of, I guess, the cellos and the horns kind of pushing through everyone else. That is something, again, that, you know, you would just do in orchestration. And you'll find in this library, there are things like that where it's very, very easy to do stuff like that just by riding the mod wheel and letting stuff lock together. And when you get to the kind of delicate stuff, so actually here, for example. So let's listen to this separately. So the first up, we've got this high woodwind and strings. Stole a Bernard Herrmann chord at the end there. Sorry about that. And this melody here. And then, you know, I'm thinking in terms of the sections only, and you'll be, you know, from listening to music that you love that has orchestra playing it, you'll have a lot of this stuff in your subconscious. Even if you're not familiar with orchestration, there will be things that you recognize from the way that people orchestrate. And a lot of it is about contrast, about having a section playing something, and it might be contrast in pitch. It might be contrast in instrument groups. So here, after that kind of woodwind and strings statement that you get in those two sections there, we have this section here. And actually there, I can hear that note has a little bit too much. Yeah, there you go. Now, that's something actually that's worth mentioning. On these legato patches, they're designed so that you can play accented, also staccato. So you've got a combination of mod wheel is controlling things, slightly controlling the timbre, and also the dynamic, and your key velocity is also controlling those things to a certain extent. So it's a kind of combination of enabling you to play with staccato or with an accent wherever you are on the mod wheel, but things don't massively jump out and kind of ruin the effect. But if you want the natural start of the note, you just play softly. As opposed to where you get that kind of hard attack at the front of the note. And so, sorry, a bit of a diversion, but that I just noticed that on that note, which is why I've pulled the velocity back down, and therefore we're going to get that nice effect. So you can see I'm slightly artificially softening it, but I want a really soft entry to these, because what I want is it to almost pick up what's going on in the chords and then sing out. I don't want it to come in hard so you hear the entry of the part. And that's maybe the way that I use ensemble parts as well. I tend to be quite careful about how they're coming and going, because they're groups of instruments and I'm interlocking them to make an overall effect. Now, actually, it's just worth looking at the mixer, because I've got this little channel EQ here. I'm just taking a little bit of the low end out. And the reason for that is if you listen to the part that is playing that. So if I just go here. And then if we solo it. Now, if I take the EQ off, it's a subtle thing. Here's the earlier section. And with the EQ back on. So I'm just taking out a little bit of the low end so that it's leaning slightly more into the trumpet sound. That's all it is, really. I just want to focus on that and brighten that up. And this is the thing, even with the channel EQ in Logic, with your basic stock EQ plugins, don't just think of these as fixing problems, because if you've got a well-recorded instrument, then there's not going to be that many problems to fix, if any, hopefully, because it's been recorded properly. But what you will have is, rather than thinking, oh, I need to notch out some problem EQ or whatever, you can just go, what's the character of the sound? What's the element of the sound that I want to hear the most? And what stuff is extraneous? Now, I'm absolutely not a fan of this kind of theory that was around for a while of, high pass everything from, 200 hertz. That isn't a bass or a bass drum or something, because there's so much good stuff in the whole frequency range from all kinds of instruments. So it's not about that. It's more about emphasizing the stuff that you want either by boosting it a little bit or by just dropping the stuff that isn't important away. And then you just leave yourself a little bit more room in the frequency spectrum. But, you can go too far with this and it becomes too extreme, and then it doesn't sound like an orchestra anymore. But the only other thing I'm using here, and so you can hear that it's got this great SSL subgen that is my new favorite low-end plugin. And just to show you what it's like without that, so let's turn it off and back on. And it's really just giving you, a nice pump. I played that quite hard on the keyboard, but the really soft version has much less of the metallic sound in, but I like the color of both of those things. And also we're using some cymbals in here. It's got the subgen on, but I don't really care. Still sounds fine. If that bothered me, I'd separate them out, obviously, onto two separate tracks, but it's all good. What else? We've got the tune percussion. So just again, I'm using the same mic mix here. You can see the close tree and ambient. And actually, if I take the air reverb off that, it's still got the lovely character of the room, but it's just not as big. and it's a slightly artificial effect, but it's something that is part of our colour palette that we use and commonly used in film score to kind of glue everything together. I don't really like that expression, but there you go. So that's used a couple of times for that kind of colour. That's it, really. Haven't used the piano xylophone, although that's fabulous as well. Just a little bit too pointed. I was going for the kind of most lyrical side of the orchestra that I could, you know, conjure up. And I think that's probably a little bit too sharp for me. Don't think there's anything else. It's quite interesting to watch again here, the woodwind and strings diverging here. Actually, I'll put in the orchestra as well. Just have a listen from this point. And that kind of shows you, it's just it's writing lines and the way that you get the lines to interact. And there's a great clash here. And if we look at the chart, we've got our tonality here is B flat, but we've got the A flat and we've got the sharp 4, which is that E. So let me put both of these tracks into record so you can hear both. Turn it down a little bit. So B flat at the bottom. Then you've got that E, the 7th. So it's a big crunchy chord, but spread across lots of different voices. So you've got, in total, you've got the B flat at the bottom. You've got, we're arpeggiating, so we get the 5th and then the 9th. So that's a kind of 9th chord. You've got that 7th, that A flat in there as well. But you've also got this, what I guess you'd call sharp 11. It's the 4th raised semitone. So that, what would usually be an E flat in the key of B flat, we do, except, so our tonality for here is, and when you spread that over a big chord and you've got everything spaced out nicely and the lines are moving logically, it just sounds really lovely, and it's bringing in a kind of, you know, something that could be kind of jagged. It's bringing it into a really lovely kind of movement that is tension and resolve, and then that obviously resolves to the 3rd, to the D. And I think that's probably about it for looking at the way that this has been put together. If I just stretch the tempo track down, you can see I'm using it partly to humanize. So things, as we kind of get into a new phrase, it speeds up a little bit. And then as we get towards the end of a phrase, it slows down a little bit. You can see the shapes there, you know, if you kind of compare with what's below. And then there are a couple of moments where I really drop the tempo. And that is where if you imagine the conductor is taking a pause and then bringing everyone in. So it's just at the end of a phrase where you imagine like a breath for a choir or something like that. It's that kind of thing. You know, it just adds an element of humanity to it. And an interesting thing actually is stick a piece of music into your door and put a click track to it. Just work out where all the beats are and have a look and see what happens. And I did this once with the Nutcracker, with the bum 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 bum. I can't remember what I was doing. Something for the BBC, I think, symphony orchestra. But that I put in a performance of it that I really liked. And when I looked at the way that the tempo is changing, it was revelatory. I was just quite shocked by how massively violent the tempo changes were. and how much it was moving. Because you kind of think, it's like when you're making an EQ change, you kind of go, oh, that looks a bit much. Don't ever look at it. Just turn it until it sounds right. But here again, looking at some of these tempo changes, you might look at it and go, oh no, that looks like it's going to be too much. I'll dial it back a bit. And, we shouldn't be looking at music. We should be hearing our music. So easier said than done, I know. But there we go. That's the tempo map. In fact, I'll leave that up and let's just have one more listen through. I'll try and put everything on here. Maybe push that up a little bit so we can see the whole thing. And what's that? Our modulations. So yeah, here we go. One last listen through. There we go. Hope that was useful. Hope there's a couple of ideas you can take away into your own music making from that. Thank you very much for watching. Look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye bye.